This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up, and welcome to our post-game Q&A, the Q&A where I take your questions after the game. You guys have done a great job of asking questions all season. Have done a great job of keeping up all season, even though the Browns have put us through a lot over the last couple of years. Here's hoping that this offseason leads to some solutions and some very big problems that can make it so that the Browns are not doing this to us again. Okay? Justin says this. And the question from Justin will pop up in just a second. Justin says this: would you be more interested in getting a guy like Malik Willis as a bridge guy, as well as a rookie with our first, or a more tenured vet, or just a rookie and let Deshaun Watson be the mentor guy? So you're assuming the Browns are taking a quarterback, right, in the first round. And we're asking a question about basically who the bridge guy should be. I think Malik Willis is going to be a bit expensive for a bridge quarterback. I think he's going to command a price tag that you would have to feel comfortable with him as your, not a long-term starter, right? We're not talking about giving him a 5-year contract, but you're going to give them a chance to be your starter for a couple of years, right? Like, Malik Willis is more of a plan B if you can't get the quarterback you want in the draft than a bridge quarterback. I think there are a number of ways you can go with bridge quarterback. All of these ways are probably going to have to be cheap, because keep in mind, the Browns are still going to be spending money on Deshaun Watson this year. So, it's not a big problem long term, but just for the cap's sake this year, you're going to want something cheap to be the bridge option. You're probably looking at, if you want a veteran, a guy like Jacoby Brissett. If you want a young guy, you can pick between Shador or Dylan Gabriel, whichever one fits whatever coach gets hired. It's fancy. But honestly, I think if you're the Browns, you're drafting a quarterback. Again, I have absolutely no problem with doing that this year. I think that this is a good year to draft a quarterback in the top 5. But if you're the Browns and you're doing it, just have a plan, right? If you're going to get a veteran to back him up and be that mentor in the quarterback room, sure, do that. If you feel like you can have more of a mentorship from the coaching staff and you don't need that from the quarterback room, then sure, do that, right? Like, if they hired somebody like, I'll just throw out a name like Josh McCown, right? A CEO type coach who's a former player and also a former quarterback. He could be somebody who's interesting, because Josh McCown is also, who you would want as a bridge quarterback. Now, obviously, Josh McCown not going to be head coach and play for the freaking Browns. But what Josh McCown could do is kind of hold down the fort as a veteran mind in that locker room for the quarterback position, because he's the head coach. What he says is going to stick. So might be something that you can look into. Whatever they do, there's got to be a plan, right? There just has to be a plan. There has to be a plan of how everything you do that offseason is going to assist that quarterback in their first 2 years. Everything you do, free agency, draft, has to be thought through that lens of how is this going to help the guy that we draft in the first round, if that is the route that you're going to go by. And it starts with your head coaching hire. So I think all of these things are factors, but as far as like bringing in a specific bridge guy, I think they're going to go with something cheap or something that's already on the roster that they've already paid for. Thank you for the question, Justin. Next question comes from AJM, who says this: pending the outcome of the Ravens-Pats game and the Saturday night Ravens game, which is Ravens versus Green Bay Packers, the Steelers could have the division locked up by then. Will they rest their starters if that's the case? I don't think Mike Tomlin has had a history of resting starters back-to-back weeks. I don't think he'll do it back-to-back weeks. I think we're going to see the Steelers starters no matter what next week. He will definitely rest his starters after this week, but I don't think he's going to create a whole game plan because, like, the reason I don't think he's going to bench his starters is simple. The Steelers have to game plan this week. The Steelers have to practice this week. For the bulk of that work, they're not going to have the knowledge of whether the Ravens played themselves out of the division or not. Because keep in mind, I think if the Ravens win next week and Pittsburgh loses or wins next week, then the division can be won by Baltimore. I think it's something like that. So they still got a lot to worry about. They're not going to practice all week, put in a game plan, and then like throw that out the window so they can play backups against the Browns. They're going to play their starters. Now, if they get a big lead on the Browns, they absolutely will pull their starters. The Steelers pulled their starters this year up by 11 points or some shit like that. That wasn't even before the playoffs. That was week 5. Okay. So yeah, they will pull the starters if they get a big lead on the Cleveland Browns, but I think the starters are going to play no matter what, because you can't make that decision on Saturday, whether you're going to play your starters or not. You have to make that decision on Tuesday and Wednesday. And by the time we get to Tuesday or Wednesday, we're not going to know what the Ravens situation is. So you're going to hear all the Tomlinisms this week, right? We can't play anticipating all of that. We just got to go out there and do our job. The Mike Tomlin shit. He going to say the Mike Tomlin shit. They're going to do the Mike Tomlin shit. They're going to try to win this game against the Cleveland Browns. Jerry says this. First off, shout out to you and your channel for delivering honest Browns content and not falling into the Shador clickbait drama. Okay, thank you. Dante Moore is only 20 and a redshirt sophomore. Does his age and lack of starts concern you at all? If we do go the Moore route, could you see a new coach rolling with Shador or a vet essentially giving Dante a redshirt year? I think whenever we're having this conversation about somebody you think is good enough to be a top 5 pick, you're going to have to follow the lead of that top 5 pick with whatever your plan ends up being after you draft them. The plan, like Baker Mayfield's a good example of this. The plan was we're going to sit Baker Mayfield for at least half a year. And then Baker was good in camp. And then he stepped in for Tyrod Taylor and then Baker's the starter. Right. The plan for Cam Ward was that he wasn't going to start right away. And then Will Levis gets hurt, and then Cam Ward's the starter. So you got to follow the lead of where Dante Moore is. You got to see what he's ready for and what he's not ready for, right? If we get to the end of training camp and Dante Moore is at the point where he's ready for NFL reps, then give him NFL reps. If he's not, then he's not, and you should have a plan for that. Again, They just gotta factor for these things, right? They can't go into it saying Dante Moore will never play this year because that plan's gonna break down. Dante Moore is gonna play if you draft him. Fernando Mendoza is gonna play if you draft him. You can't go into the year with the plan that Dante Moore is gonna be the starter, but maybe he's not ready by the time you get there, right? Like you just gotta take it as it goes. And develop as it goes. Dante Moore might be ready to have a CJ Stroud type start to his career, or Dante Moore might need a longer warm-up time because he is so young. I think there's a lot of things to factor in before the Browns can really make a decision on that. All I ask is that the Browns are prepared for both scenarios if that's the way that they go. Go Buckeyes says, I know people ask a lot of the time, but who should be the next offensive mind behind the Browns since Kev is all but gone? The question is, what style of offense would you like to see implemented with the players on the roster, free agent, and draft capital? That's an interesting question. I think what I want to see is somebody who's not really following the specific trend that the NFL is on right now. Because right now, what's happening and what's been happening over the last couple of years is that NFL offenses have been hell-bent on getting bigger, right? And there's a sliding pole of like what NFL offenses do versus what NFL defenses do. And usually the terms of this is dictated by the defense. So, in order to adjust to what offenses were doing by spreading out the ball, NFL defenses responded by getting smaller and more athletic. Then recently, to respond to that, NFL offenses have responded to smaller linebackers, smaller defensive tackles by getting bigger offensive linemen and running heavier packages. So while it could be tempting to say, hey, I want somebody who's going to do what the trend is, I don't want somebody who's going to do what the trend is, right? Because part of what I think is the issue with Kevin is Kevin was somebody who was really cool and really good when the trend was wide zone Shanahan style scheme. But when the trend started to shift away from that and went more into the McVay part of that offensive identity, Kevin struggled to adjust because he was somebody who was really good for that trend. You feel me? But he didn't have anything for these other trends. And when you're the trend follower and not a trend setter, there's an issue. So it could be very easy to be like, oh, this is what the rest of the league is doing. We're going to do what's in style there. I want the Browns to bring in somebody who has a pretty strict, and I don't want to say strict, a pretty distinct, that's the word I'm looking for, a distinct style of offense of their own that they can demonstrate a track record of success with. Doesn't mean that you have to bring in an offense from like Pluto, right? But just somebody who has demonstrated, hey, this is how my philosophy on offense works, and I like doing this, because I think that makes you more trend proof. Because I think ultimately what got Kevin was that he wasn't trend proof. But that's really kind of something I've been looking for. It's like, hey, can this guy kind of show us that he's just not a product of the current trends going on in the NFL and that he's more than that? You know, I think there's something to be said for that. That's why, like a Clint Kubiak, I have my reservations, right? Because he feels like a trend guy more than somebody who is more of a trendsetter, you know, but we can figure all of that out as we go on and if we have a coaching search. But that's kind of my 2 cents on it. We're going to continue with these questions, but I got to thank my sponsor first, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. All right, the next question comes from Maui, who says this. Hey, Q, does Andrew Berry get free reign over the coaching staff now? I know Stefanski had complete control over his staff since he was brought in at the same time as Berry, but now reports are sounding like Berry is in control of the head coach searching process. If they fire Stefanski, do you think he'll also have oversight or veto powers on coordinator hires or whoever the coaches he chooses, like other GM-led organizations, and have the power to force new head coach to keep certain coordinators like Jim Schwartz, Tommy Rees, if he really likes them as play callers? Will he have the power to do those things? Sure. Will he want to put himself in a position to exercise that power? I doubt it, right? What Andrew Berry is going to have he's going to have the ability to dictate the terms of his relationship with his next head coach, right? So if the terms that Andrew Berry is comfortable with is, hey, you worry about your coaching staff, I'll handle the player personnel stuff, then those are the terms that Andrew Berry can create and stick to. If Andrew Berry wants terms like, hey, I want to be more involved in the coordinator and hire process, that's something that he can create and then stick to. What Andrew Berry's going to have control over is the terms of that relationship. He'll be able to set those terms. I don't think once he hires the coach, he could change those terms because the coach is still going to be part of the leadership organization flowchart of the Cleveland Browns. But he gets to dictate what the terms are going to be and set what those terms are going to be. That being said, I think he does appreciate having some input in coordinator hires. I don't think he wants input on coordinator firing. Like, I think he wants to leave that up to the coach. And I think there are some considerations that you got to consider if you want to bring in a quality candidate, because somebody might not be willing to take the terms that they feel like you could just meddle in their staff, right? So again, he will be able to dictate whatever the terms are for that relationship, or be able to accept in advance what those terms are going to be, because he's the one setting those terms. But will he will he use it absolutely like that? I don't think so, because it just wouldn't be smart for him to do that. And I think he is well versed enough to understand that, right? Like, if he's trying to do the Philly model, the thing about Howie Roseman is he's willing to give his coaches a lot of run, right? Like, he gave Chip Kelly the ability to pick players. You know what I mean? That's the Howie way, right? So he's going to probably hire somebody that he can feel like he can grow a relationship with and grow trust with over time. And as that trust grows, maybe the amount of leeway that coach gets grows. We'll see. But he gets to dictate the terms of that relationship. But I don't think he's going to have so much power that once he hires somebody, right, he can then just like try to do whatever the fuck he wants. The terms that he sets once he hires somebody is going to be the terms that Jimmy Haslam's going to force him to stick to, if that makes sense. It's not just going to be this artificial thing. Like, he's going to have to stick to these terms, because that's what Jimmy, Andrew, and the coach all agreed to. So that's what I'm saying. I hope that was clear. Randy says this: does Jim Schwartz need to go to? The defense has been undisciplined and unable to make wrap-up tackle. I don't think Jim Schwartz needs to go. If you want to fire Jim Schwartz, okay. I'm not going to feel too strongly about it one way or the other. I do think keeping him would be a nice thing of continuity, especially since the defense has been good. Are there frustrating things about a Jim Schwartz defense? Of course, but we lose sight of this. The Browns defense is so close to perfect that when they're not perfect, it sticks out like a sore thumb. But the reality is, you watch football any given Sunday, every team's defense does stuff that pisses off their fans. Like, they have an amount of success against them. Like, what we've been complaining about as Browns fans has been very minor. Like, even in this game versus the Buffalo Bills, did it suck that we couldn't stop the run in the first half? Sure. But ultimately, they only gave up like 24 points in that game, or 23 points in that game. There are people who would strangle somebody to have a defense that good. Again, we got to recognize, like, when we're complaining about the Browns defense, we're having rich people complaints about defense. Like, the Browns defense, in a perfect world with a good quarterback, is good enough to win every game that they've played in. You know what I mean? Like, if the Browns have a good offense, the Browns defense has been good enough in every game to win. So I think some of the criticism on Jim Schwartz really only exists because in order for the Browns to win for the last 3 years, we've needed the defense to be perfect, and they're not perfect. But you look around the league, every defense does stuff to piss you off. You know what I mean? The Browns defense has that, but it's significantly less than a lot of other teams out there when you look at the numbers. So, like, if you can avoid firing Jim Schwartz, I'd understand it. You know what I mean? Because why fire him if you don't got to, when the defense isn't a problem? Now, if you feel like the right hire requires you to fire Jim Schwartz, then hey, do what you got to do. But if you don't feel like you got to do it, then why not? Jim Schwartz is good enough to win a championship with. We wouldn't be the force organization to win a championship with him as defensive coordinator, with the team leaning on defense. Eric says, are we cursed destinations to be the bottom franchises? Our fans' despicable behavior has put me in a cloud of darkness about being a Browns fan. From the booing of players hurt or benched, or playing in the decision-making of the organization, it seems like we aren't destined to be a good team or organization. One, let's take some deep breaths, right, Eric? Let's do a breathing exercise, buddy. You know what I mean? Let's All right. So we're doing some deep breaths. We're relaxing. We're calming down a little bit. Now, here's what I'll say. For a while, the Chicago Bears felt like a cursed franchise. If it weren't for the Cleveland Browns, the Chicago Bears would have been the cursed franchise. See, they are the team that has gone the longest, other than the Cleveland Browns, without a franchise quarterback. And, Bears fans have done some despicable shit. They've booed people when they shouldn't have been booed. They've had some bad decisions be made. This is the franchise that took Mitchell Trubisky, number 2 overall, over Patrick Mahomes. You talk about demons that need to be exercised, right? That's been the life of a Bears fan. But they make one good decision. The one good decision they made was to make this trade with the Carolina Panthers, because the Carolina Panthers really wanted Bryce Young. They didn't want him. And that trade turned into a number 1 overall selection for Caleb Williams. And 2 years later, Caleb Williams is that team's franchise quarterback, and they're on their way to possibly being the 1 seed in the NFC. Nobody's cursed, okay? It can feel like you're cursed because you're witnessing a team make the same bad decisions over and over again. But you're one clean break, you're one break away from not feeling cursed anymore. And usually that break comes in making the decision to get a quarterback. So the Browns can find their guy, build around that guy. It could feel a lot different. But that's going to be what it takes, We'll see what happens. But if it can happen to Chicago, it can happen to Cleveland. You know what I mean? And vice versa, right? The same way the Cavs winning the championships ironically motivated Chicago Cubs fans to believe that they could win a championship in baseball. The following, right after the Cavs did it, so like 4 months after the Cavs won that championship, then the Bears getting their quarterback and having their run should be motivation enough for the Browns to feel like they could do the same thing, because it's not the reason the Browns don't have a franchise quarterback has nothing to do with the city of Cleveland, has nothing to do with the team being called the Browns, has nothing to do with the orange helmet and the uniform. It has everything to do with 25 years of timid decision-making, reactionary decision-making that has continued to put this team on a never-ending run of plans that only go 2-3 years. We have the opportunity to change that this offseason. I hope they take it. Josh says this. I directly manage teams of 50 plus people of all ages. Quarterbacks and coaches are rarely discussed in the same way as managers, but it would be a good idea to consider. Accountability, vulnerability, integrity are all keys and great leaders of men. How would you rank Mendoza, Moore, and Shador in their ability to hold others accountable, build loyalty, or do what's necessary when no one's watching? For me, Mendoza shines here. It could be the hardest part of a quarterback to determine. I think the reason it's a hard part to determine for a quarterback is in the NFL, results are going to matter here when it comes to your ability to do that. Nobody's going to be a great leader of men when they're constantly losing. And the reason it is because the NFL is a business, right? You need to make money. You need to win games. And if you're not winning games, your value as a player goes down. And if your value dips down low enough, you're not going to care what some guy has to say about you doing your job. You're going to go into business for yourself. That's just how this works. And the reason that's so hard to evaluate in the NFL is because you also have to evaluate if they're going to be good. Like, yeah, the leadership skills, the base ability to manage and lead, that matters. But I think a lot of people who have come into the league as quarterbacks have those abilities because it's part of running an organization in college, is having those abilities. But if you can't win, you never get to use those skills, right? The quarterbacks who get to use those leadership skills are the ones who win. If you lose, it doesn't matter how great of a leader you are, unless you want to become a coach in your 30s or 40s, you know? So that's really, I think, the differentiator, right? It's nice to know what kind of leadership qualities they have. It's nice to know what kind of skills they have when it comes to that, but can they produce the results to earn that trust from the players on the field? Can they show what they need to show in practice enough for the players on the field to give what that player says credibility? You know, that's the thing that matters, and that's how credibility works. You need to be a good player to have your words matter in the league. Hey, nice 311 says, I think we need to trade Gabriel for the Browns to sell his, and his getting booed every time he's on the field is not good for either party. Who do you think is going to be the starter for the wide receivers next year? So yeah, the booing stuff with Dylan Gabriel, it's old. I mean, I think a lot of Browns fans are really starting to get over that. We'll see, right? We're in the height of the Shador mania. People are really wanting Shador to get his chance. I wonder how much the dynamic with Dylan Gabriel changes if Shador is not on the roster, or if it's clear that the Browns are not moving towards a direction that includes building the franchise around Shador. I wonder if that animosity kind of goes away, because it's unfortunate that Dylan Gabriel is dealing with this level of animosity for the crime of not being amazing in his rookie year. Because honestly, if we were saying that that was a worthy enough crime to dictate the booing of Dylan Gabriel and the way that Dylan's been booed, I mean, I can show you Dylan Gabriel's stats next to Shador Sanders' stats, next to Cody Kessler's stats, and you tell me if everybody on that list should be booed. You know what I mean? It's just not justifiable at this point. It's tacky. Like, I understand that Browns fans and that Cleveland fans in general, we have an edge that I appreciate about Browns fans, but this feels different. Like, this doesn't feel like passion. This feels petty. You know, it feels like it feels mean. And it shouldn't feel mean. It should feel like it comes from a place of passion, not nasty. You know what I mean? Maybe I can make more sense of it when we talk about this topic again. But, you know, I just, something about it doesn't hit me right. Booing the guy every time he walks onto the field when all he's done is be a mediocre quarterback for a franchise that's seen nothing but mediocre quarterbacks before and currently. Like, what are we doing? Why are we booing Dylan Gabriel here? He's not a threat to be the starter anymore. The Browns have made that clear. And every time he touches the field, people boo. Like, what's going on here? Why? What's the reason for this? I think if it happens one more time, honestly, that'd be the straw that breaks the camel's back for most Browns fans, and this would start to turn into support for him. So I don't think you need to trade Dylan Gabriel. I think this dynamic will figure itself out over the next few months anyways. And, you know, as far as they got to figure out what they're going to do with backup quarterback, but who do I think is going to be the starter next year at quarterback? It's probably going to be either Gabriel, Sanders, or, you know, like a Jacoby Brissett type figure, you know, but that's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Everybody have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.